August 1948, and a young preacher named George Vandeman was preparing to take the pulpit. That was 70 years ago, and since that time, Soquel Camp Meeting has convened every summer. In many ways, Soquel embodies America's camp meeting, a timeless tradition of faith intersecting with culture, pleasure with praise, and truth within tradition. Camp Meeting is so valuable we believe it should be shared not just once, but all year long. That is why the Central California Conference leadership team has produced the best of Soquel. Our special made-for-TV editions showcase the best Soquel has to offer, while providing for you the best of Soquel programming from the comfort of your own home. These newly released programs are our gifts to you, and the best part is you don't have to register an RV, pack a suitcase, sleep in a tent, or so much as leave your front door. You can literally go to camp meeting right now from the comfort of that favorite armchair. We invite you today to sit back, relax, let the Holy Spirit in, and enjoy the best of Soquel today.
Another story about God using young people in evangelism. California Youth Rush student Will John was standing at a door in Bakersfield, California. The homeowner, named Josh, smiled politely but said, "I'm an atheist. I'm not interested in any of your books." But Will John wanted to understand the young man's views, so he asked him, "How did you become an atheist?" Josh explained that he had been raised as a believer, but at the age of 18 had become disillusioned with all his unanswered questions and with the apparent inconsistencies in the Bible. Will John asked what some of Josh's questions were, and on the front steps, Will John conducted a short Bible study. At the end, Josh was amazed at how easily Will John had answered his questions and said, "You must be a Seventh-day Adventist. I've listened to your local radio station before." Before Will John left, Josh agreed to sign up for more information about the Bible. God uses young people in evangelism.
Chromosomes and neurochemical tsunamis. This is one of my favorite topics because I have so much fun with it, especially when I go to universities and talk to the freshman class, and occasionally when I go to churches. I'm telling you, you can hear a pin drop. So, let me begin by saying that this presentation is designed to share with you current research conclusions from biology and from brain function. Research conclusions that come as generalizations, meaning in general, this is what we find about human beings when we do large sample studies. It's information. It is not a theological or an ecclesiastical discussion, so be very clear about that. We're talking about brain function. Researchers don't always agree on everything. It's very much like many committees that I have sat on. But there seems to be some consensus that whatever else human beings are, humans are spiritual, not necessarily religious. Religious is affiliation. Religion is affiliation with a group or a body, an organization. Spiritual, relational, we're designed to relate to each other and to nature and to creatures. And sexual. And that bothers some people. I'm told it really bothered the Quakers. No, not the Quakers, the Shakers, excuse me. The Shakers, who thought that you couldn't be good and be sexual, and so they weren't, and so they're extinct. But when we talk about human beings being sexual, we're not talking about how they use their equipment in sexual behaviors. We're talking about we're sexual beings, meaning that we have different chromosomes. Studies show that you can develop addictive behaviors around almost anything. Certainly around religion, you can be a religious addict. Certainly around relationships, you can actually be addicted to other people. You can be addicted to all kinds of substances and processes, and from gambling to, hoarding. And you can become addicted to sexual activities. So far, they haven't found anybody who was addicted to genuine spirituality. And I find that interesting. So a little biology 101, if you remember this from high school. And as I said, I do have fun with this. I was speaking to a freshman class at a university, and we were talking about the latest information on genes and chromosomes. And I'll tell you a couple of things that happened because I'm still chuckling about it. So typically, if we are average, normal people, and normal just means commonly occurring. Doesn't necessarily mean desirable or functional, it just means commonly occurring. So if we are normal, the belief currently is that we have 23 pairs of chromosomes. And you can see them numbered 1 to 22. And typically we get one of each pair from each parent. And then you come to the 23rd pair, and those are the sex chromosomes. And they're X and Y. And typically, when I went to nursing school in the late 1800s at Loma Linda University, we learned that females had 2 X's, 46 chromosomes, and that males had an X and a Y and 46 chromosomes. And we thought that was real. But it's way bigger than that, and now we have sophisticated enough equipment that allows us to know that. So that's part of what I want to share with you today. I'm at this university talking about this, and a hunk in the back stood up. I'm not so far over the hill, I can't recognize a hunk. He was buff and cute. And he goes, "Dr. Taylor, there's something wrong with your slide." I said, "Well, there may be. I'm not visual. I do my best. What's wrong with it?" Well, he says, just look at this. He says, "Here you've got the X chromosome, and look at how big it is. And the picture, the Y chromosome, there's something wrong with that. It looks like it's been busted off." I said, "No, it hasn't. The Y chromosome is very, very small." He goes, "It can't be. I mean, males have a Y." I said, "Yes, I know that." I said, "You do also realize that the human sperm is the smallest cell in the body. And the human egg or ovum is the largest cell. You don't have any eggs, I don't have any sperm, but they're big and little. And here we go again. We've got a much larger X chromosome and a pretty weeny, teeny, tiny Y. Hey, just go for it." And he's trying to argue, and I don't argue. He says, "It can't be. I'm telling you, it's wrong." And so I just quit talking and let him take over. And pretty soon, one of the other students looked around and says, "Oh, sit down and shut up. You don't know what you're talking about." And one of the girls, hope he didn't hear it, one of the girls near the front said, "Well, there you go. I just learned that good looks and brains don't necessarily come in the same package." So see why I like this? Something funny is always happening. Okay, so back in the late 1800s, when I was in nursing school, we had what we called a male-female or a gender continuum. And it had 2 sections to it, because we learned that all human beings are a mix of empathizing and systemizing. But in general, a female brain with 2 X's will have higher levels of empathizing, and a male systemizing brain will have higher levels of systemizing. But we all have both. I mean, women know how to put their underwear on first, That's a systemizing thing. And males can be empathetic, very empathetic. So when you look at research from McGill University in Montreal, for example, that they're doing a lot of male-female differences, and I just love it, that research. They talk about giving every person, as they do their research, 2 numbers on this scale, so that an excessively feminine female, which, by the way, is not me, the exceedingly feminine female is probably going to be a 9 empathizing and a 1 systemizing. And the most masculine male is going to be a 9 systemizing and a 1 empathizing. Dr. Simon Baron-Cohen estimates that 95% of the population could fit on that continuum. And I tell people, avoid coming up and asking me about the other 5% because you think you're married to one, because we don't know that much about it. It's just that's his estimate. 95% of the world's population at that time could fit on this. All right, fast forward. We started getting more sophisticated equipment and learning more about chromosomes and genes. We were beginning to find more chromosomal patterns. Not just XX for females, but XO, just 1 X, or 3 X's, as you see in Turner syndrome. And in the systemizing brain, we would find certainly XY, probably still the most common, but XXY and XYY. And then we found something called intersex biology, if you will. And those individuals are called 50-50 people. So researchers had to put in a 50-50 section here in the middle, because intersex people can be either XX or XY or any of these other patterns. The difference is that 50-50 people will have 1 ovary and 1 testicle, literally half and half, and their brains seem to be half and half, so they can relate just as easily to female brains or to male brains. Sometimes they have the ovary and the testicle in 1 organ called an ovotestis, and we certainly didn't know anything about that. Research in 2004, I'll just give you a couple of quick little pieces. Research in 2004 showed that Y chromosomes were found in the peripheral blood of women who'd never been pregnant with a male child. And they're going, okay, how did Y chromosomes get in the peripheral blood of these women? That's very strange. And in 2012, when they were doing autopsies on women who had died, probably didn't need to say that because you wouldn't be doing an autopsy if they hadn't already died. But you know, they're very specific in research. So they were looking at the brains of deceased women, doing an autopsy, and they found Y chromosomes in cells in several different parts of the brain. Now, this is a puzzle. How did that happen? We began to get more and more examples of patterns of differences. And this is my attempt to just put them in one slide. So let me just quickly go through some of this with you. We certainly have the 50-50 group of people here, the intersex people. And you know, humans are so interesting. I remember I was speaking to an annual convention for high school teachers, and one of the teachers put up a hand and said, how am I going to know whether I've got a student that's an intersex person? I said, you aren't. Well, he says, that's disconcerting. I want to know. I said, what would you do with that? Well, I don't know, but I think I should know. And I said, well, the only time I can possibly think that another person might have a right to know was if they were thinking about marrying somebody and having children, and you might want to check out what's going on here. No, he says, I need to know. I said, so what are you going to do? You're going to stand at the school door as the kids come in every day, and are you going to say, you know, you look like a female on the outside. Have you got 2 ovaries, or do you have 1 ovary and a testicle? Are you going to say the same thing to a male? You look like a male. You sure you don't have an ovary? You sure you got 2 testicles? It's ridiculous. But what can I say? So we've got the 50-50 intersex people. Now looking at the X chromosomal patterns that have been identified so far that I'm aware of, we have some who just have 1 X and they've got 45 chromosomes, don't reach the number 46. We definitely do have probably the preponderance of 2 X's, 46 chromosomes, but we've also got some with 48 chromosomes, XXXX. We've got some with 49 XXXXX. And when we look at the Y chromosome complement, we have far more variation. There's no equivalent to the female X0, 45 chromosomes. And there definitely is the XY, 46. But there's XYYY with 48, and there's XXXY with 48, and XYYY. Not why, Y. And then we've got 49, XXXYY, XYYYY, and XXXXY. And the last research paper that I got shows that we probably have some more coming up. So it's way more complicated than we once thought, just lumping everybody into 2 big categories. What does it mean? It means that human beings are different. That's what it means. Just like every brain on the planet is different, many people have a different chromosomal pattern. Tel Aviv University is doing wonderful research on male-female differences, and it's becoming one of my favorite branches of brain function. And here's some conclusions from a batch of research they did fairly recently. They did 1,400 brain scans, which is really quite a lot, because it's a pretty complex process to do a brain scan. So what have they found? Number 1, male and female brains are more alike than they are different. Well, that's no surprise. Look at the whole species of dogs. Look at the whole species of cats. Each one is more alike than they're different. But look how much variation there are just in the species of cats and the species of dogs. And there is no default position. What does that mean? It means that we used to be taught that all fetuses start out the same when a woman gets pregnant. And unless there is a specific chemical bath to that little fetal brain, that fetus will end up as an empathizing female. That's not true. At the moment of conception, that little brain is already programming toward being an empathizing female or a systemizing male or an intersex. That's what currently we believe. There is no default position. And you know, it never made sense to some of us, because the default position turning out to be female means back then that there would be 2 X chromosomes. Well, a chemical bath is not going to change the chromosomes, so where's the Y coming from? So as we're getting more research, some of it's starting to make a little more sense. There are multiple ways to be male and female, and we've seen that just in the chromosomal patterns. And most of those ways are completely overlapping. You know, we're much more alike than we are different. You cannot do a brain scan, you cannot look at a brain and determine gender. And that discombobulates many people. I'll give you a couple of examples. In general, the inner ear of a straight female brain looks very much like the inner ear of a straight male brain. And so you might see some differences on a scan, but because there are so many differences, you don't know what that exactly means. For example, you know that the brain's made of two hemispheres, the cerebrum, each with a fissure in each side, so you have 4 chunks. You do brain scans on 100 people, and Broca's area, the part of the brain that allows a person to speak aloud, is always centered up here in the equivalent of the left frontal lobe. But it may not be in the same place exactly in that left frontal lobe in any of the brains. So therefore, you can't just look at a brain and say, well, this person is this and this person is that. There are differences, as I mentioned, in a brain of somebody who says, I am lesbian, that inner ear will resemble more the inner ear of a male. And you can, there's 15 or 20 differences that have been found. But it's not necessarily predictive because every brain and body comes in different sizes. And as I said, the same function can be located in a slightly different part of the brain. Some individuals are what we call congruent. And that term came from studies of students in a master's program when you were looking at preference. And some people have all their preferences on one side, meaning their right eye is dominant, their right hand is dominant, their right arm is dominant, their right leg is dominant, their right foot is dominant. And some people are all mixed up. I happen to be all mixed up. I have a right dominant eye, but a left dominant arm. I have clearly a right-handed dominance, but if I stand on one foot, I always stand on my left foot. So some people have congruent dominance, congruent preference, and some people don't. When you're talking about the brain and sexuality, some people, for example, have 2 X chromosomes. They have 2 ovaries, a vagina. They look female, and they have a female empathizing brain. But not all. Sometimes you'll find a sympathizing brain and an empathizing body. And if it gets painful enough, that person will want to try to make the body match the brain, because you can't make the brain match the body. And for males, they will have 2 testicles and another piece that hangs around those 2. And they will look like a male, and they will have a male brain, but not always. Sometimes you will have an empathizing brain in what appears to be a male systemizing body. And sometimes it's not such a big deal. People just go with it. But sometimes it is a big deal. And there's, every once in a while in the news, you'll see somebody who's, the news is talking about they've just gone and had a sex change operation because their brain doesn't match their body and they want it to match. Can't imagine what that feels like, because it is a procedure. So, some individuals are congruent and some are not. And currently, researchers say if there is a Y chromosome in their cellular complement, they're going to be considered male, period. But that doesn't mean that sometimes the brain will not be empathizing instead of systemizing. So are you beginning to see the variety and the diversity? And if we get stuck, in this, and this is all there is, we are way, way behind the times.
Another story about God using young people in evangelism. Kelly was a California Youth Rush student visiting homes in the heat of summer. On this particular day, people were giving her large contributions toward her Christian education at the academy where she attends, but they were refusing the books that she offered in return. She wanted to help someone spiritually by leaving a spiritual book. At one door, a man named Greg instantly refused her books when he discovered that her books were of a spiritual nature. He said to her, "My father committed suicide last year because he had committed a sin. He felt he had committed a sin that God could not forgive. I want nothing to do with a God like that." Kelly looked at Greg and shared a testimony of God's love and forgiveness in her own life. She appealed to him to open his heart to God. After a moment of struggle, Greg finally agreed to let Kelly pray with him. She left him with the book Steps to Christ, and when she left it, he had new light in his eyes. God uses young people in evangelism.
Greetings and welcome to the Best of Soquel. My name is Romero Cano, President of the Central California Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. The pin of inspiration shares the following. The camp meeting is one of the most important agencies in our work. It is one of the most effective methods of arresting the attention of the people. Volume 6 of Testimonies, page 31. The Central California Conference has had a very long tradition with our annual camp meeting ministry. We can trace it back for over 138 years in our conference territory. For the last 70 years, camp meeting has been held in our conference center in Soquel, California, near Santa Cruz. Camp meeting continues to be a transformative blessing, embodying old-fashioned tent revival evangelism while simultaneously sharing God's Word through a variety of inspirational and riveting speakers. Last year alone, the Soquel Camp Meeting pulpit was host to over 71 hours of live television broadcasting for both local and streaming to a worldwide church community of more than 96 countries, transporting the hope of God's soon return and the comfort of Christ's love to the furthest places of the world. It is my honor and my privilege to make the Best of Soquel available to you. At the same time, I invite you to become part of the Soquel legacy by partnering with us in our Evangelism Fund. Each year, Soquel Camp Meeting goers collect funds to propel evangelism in a variety of ways. To do so, go to Central California Conference's homepage, centralcaliforniaadventist.com. Even $1 a day is of great value to God's work. These gifts are 100% for evangelism. We invite you to also download our app, CCC Space SDA. Through it, you can enjoy many video sermons. We also have a prayer wall where you can submit a prayer request. So dear friends, wherever you are today, I invite you to sit back, let the Holy Spirit lead, be transformed by the message, the prayers, and the testimony segments. Catch and enjoy the Best of Soquel.
Another story about God using young people in evangelism. Delia was a California Youth Rush student from Fresno, California. She came up to a door and knocked. A man came out and told her in a loud, firm voice that he was not interested in whatever she had. Quietly, Delia handed him a small glow tract and smiled and continued down the street. Just a few short minutes later, she heard a distant voice and realized that someone was calling her back to that same door. The same man greeted her with a completely different attitude, eager to know what it was that she was doing. What had happened? He had read the glow tract that Delia had given him and had been convicted that he needed to give God a chance. By the end of the conversation, he had given enough for an entire set of books for his whole family. Delia praised God for giving her the strength to remain Christ-like in the face of rejection. God uses young people in evangelism.
Y variations do seem to have an increased risk for being linked with sexual misuse or with addictions related to excessive activity sexually. Nobody understood that. But we got some PET scan studies recently, and this is what the PET scan showed. When a male has an orgasm, and if you don't know what that word is, look it up when you get home. When a male has an orgasm, the intensity of that ejaculatory experience is comparable to the response induced by heroin. So, males have an orgasm and it's like getting a hit of heroin. And for some people, I guess that feels pretty good. Not interested in heroin myself, but that may feel pretty good. And if not much else is going on in their life, then you can understand the reason that sometimes they put a lot of pressure for sexual activity on their partner. I had a couple come to my office when I was doing office hours, and the woman came in and sat down and slumped, and her husband came in, hands in his pocket, sat down and looked at the floor, asked him what the problem was, and she said, all he wants is to have sex 3 times a day, and I'm fed up with it. So I said to him, talk to me about that. Well, he said, you know, my life isn't very exciting and that feels really good. I said, I can understand that. So I said to the woman, and what is your perception of that? Well, she says it's, you know, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. And she says, I don't get anything out of it. And I'm telling you, if I don't get anything out of it, sex is just messy and time-consuming, which most people would have to agree with. So I looked at him and I said, well, I want you to think about this. Just because you have the equipment does not mean you know how to use it. You can buy a very expensive car and you may not know how to drive it until you take some lessons and read the instruction book. So obviously, making love is an art and a science. And if your wife is to be believed, even at some level, your skills are abysmal to non-existent. So I would suggest you get a little help with that. But now that we've got this research, it's really easy, if not a lot is going on in a person's life, to get addicted to that response that's equal to a hit of heroin. Now, there's no equivalent in the female brain, not a zip, period. PET scans of a woman during orgasm, and a lot of them don't ever have one because their partner doesn't know what he's doing, and it's the honest truth. But at orgasm, her brain just goes silent. There's no hit of heroin. It just goes silent. And the researchers think that that represents a complete release of tension. They lose their inhibition. Also, there's a decrease in moral reasoning, a decrease in vigilance, a decrease in social judgment. That means you better do this beforehand because after it's not going to be there. a decrease in reflection, meaning that the fear-anxiety link is really, really low. And a woman who in any way is fearful or anxious will probably not be able to have an orgasm. So, look at the difference. One gets a hit of heroin, the other one just gets a momentarily clear the brain of complete total relaxation. I find that interesting. I have to cogitate on that one a little bit longer. Which brings us to sexual addiction, which I define as any condition that involves excessive preoccupation with thoughts or behaviors that give a desired sexual effect, meaning a high in the brain reward system. And naturally, based on just this research, males are at much higher risk for addiction. So is it a problem, or is sexual misuse a problem? We think so. Arguably, 40 million plus in the United States are involved with internet sites. Most of them are males, a few are females. And sex is the #1 topic researched on the internet. Not only that, 25% of all internet hits, all requests for information are pornography related. Promise Keeper males. Promise Keepers did a huge survey. 53 of the males surveyed admitted to viewing pornography during the previous week. Of the pastors in the group, 54% admitted viewing internet porn in the last year, and 30% in the last month. So we need to take the blinders off and stop thinking that just because you're aligned with religion or Christianity or Promise Keepers that there are no problems with sexual misuse and addiction. Employees, 25% of employees with internet access in one large study admitted to viewing pornography during work hours, and if and when the organization catches them, they're usually history. The employee who is viewing, not the organization. I don't know if the dog is agreeing or disagreeing. Research of Christians. 50% of males and 20% of females admitted to being addicted to pornography. So some females do, but not at that high a level. What's the big deal about pornography? Viewing pornography boosts dopamine, the powerful chemical involved with all addictive behaviors we've studied, that makes porn on demand highly addictive. But here's the other piece, social media. We live in a world of social media. Checking often on your electronic device for messages provides a 400% spike in dopamine, which is only slightly less than that of cocaine. So yes, you can get very addicted to social media. What are the risk factors that push people toward misuse of sexual activity? Poor self-esteem, poor self-image, #1. Psychiatric disorders, including depression. Anybody who tries to self-medicate with anything that's going to pump dopamine, and therefore sexual misuse can pump dopamine pretty quickly. Family dysfunction, family abuse, and anyone who's already involved with another addictive behavior. So let's switch gears just a little. The brain is the most amazing piece of biological real estate in the known universe. It works 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, from birth to death, until you fall in love. And then you risk having it turn into a chemically fueled P-brain. When couples say, we have chemistry, they're talking about brain neurotransmitters and hormones and sexual energy, and that is what they have, is chemistry. But you may not want to bring them home with you because it's just chemicals. The type of situation will impact as well the type of chemicals that are produced. And I think that's just amazing. Is this a sexual encounter, a one-night stand, hooking up romantically, or is this, or friends with benefits? Oh, I like that. I've been getting a lot of questions about friends with benefits. I just wrote an article for my last Brain Bulletin on friends with benefits. There's all kinds of benefits, and some of them are not positive. Or is this a long-term, life-committed marriage relationship? If it's just romantic, sexual, friends with benefits, 3 powerful attraction neurochemicals get released. And that's what turns you into a P-brain. And if these are mismanaged, then you're going to have an increased risk for sexually transmitted diseases, untenable marriages, affairs, cancer related to some of these STDs, pregnancy that might be coming at the wrong time, disastrous liaisons of any type that can derail a whole family and sometimes an organization, crimes, and so on. So the first of these attraction chemicals is called phenylethylamine, or PEA. It is the brain's amphetamine, if you will. Creates elation, decreases conscience, decreases boundaries, decreases morality and decision-making and judgment. So it's very powerful. You might want to know it's also found in dark chocolate and in avocado. I don't eat a lot of dark chocolate, but I eat avocado every day. The second is norepinephrine, and we talked about that because it's that messenger in the brain stem, locus coeruleus, that triggers, alerts the whole brain to any stressor. And norepinephrine gives you the gut butterflies, sweaty palms, pounding heart, lightheadedness, all of that stuff. It regulates sexual arousal. It puts you at risk of becoming a mental bug on speed in terms of your cognitive processes. And the third is dopamine, which is the brain's natural morphine, partly acts like morphine. It's really a neurotransmitter. Half of it is in your gut. It's linked with your brain reward system pretty directly, linked with emotional responses, addictions, bonding. Interesting, as the levels of adrenaline go up, so do the levels of dopamine. And any sexual activity will usually raise dopamine, and just the anticipation of pleasure raises dopamine. There's some interesting studies on voles. They took a female vole and put her in the cage next to a male vole, and they were shoving whiskers through the wires and all of that. A few days later, they took this female, put her in with a group of a whole bunch of voles, and where do you think she went? Straight to the one that she had seen before, because of the dopamine levels that she pumped. So just because you're attracted to somebody, all it is chemistry. You need to add a few other criteria to decide if you want to do anything further with that. This chemical tsunami, PEA, lasts about 18 months. Now, if you live in different countries and you don't get to see each other very often, it might last a little longer. The problem is it's easy to become addicted to PEA, and those individuals tend to move from one relationship to another as soon as the level of PEA begins to fall, because they're addicted to that passionate, exciting chemical tsunami. And if they partner later on and try to be monogamous, that can be really difficult. They're highly at risk for sexual misuse events, whether that's pornography, phone sex, masturbation, emotional affairs, physical affairs, sexual affairs, whatever. Now, if a couple meets, are attracted, and then decide that this is somebody that meets their criteria and they want to get to know them better, 3, and they marry or partner long-term, as in many countries do common law, 3 different bonding chemicals are released that are not released when you are doing friends with benefits and all of that other stuff. And those are designed to help the couple develop a close, deeply committed, bonded, happy relationship for as long as they live, hopefully to at least 122. With one exception, if it was a poor choice to begin with, this may never happen. So the number 1 bonding chemical are the endorphins, and those are really the brain's natural morphine. You get an increase in endorphins with physical exercise, sexual activity if you are in a committed love relationship, promotes attachment, comfort, it calms anxiety, it reduces stress, it relieves pain, and in that kind of environment, he will usually learn how to use his equipment effectively, and his partner will actually have orgasms. Such a deal. Second is oxytocin. It's a hormone. It plays a role in what we call the neuroanatomy of pair bonding. Plays a role in maternal behaviors. Promotes contentment, a sense of security, calmness in the presence of one's mate, and again, helps to allow orgasm to occur in partners. And the third is serotonin. It's a neurotransmitter. It's absolutely required for the brain and nervous system to function appropriately, and read my lips. Your brain is your most important sexual organ. Everything begins in the brain. And serotonin is necessary for that. Interesting, therefore, that 90% of your serotonin isn't even in your brain and nervous system, it's in your digestive system. Go figure. Somebody asked me the other day, what's the reason for that? And I said, I'd need to see the blueprints. I don't know. Serotonin impacts mood. It helps with happiness. It helps you sleep. It contributes to a sense of well-being. It increases with moderate physical activity, and sexual activity done ideally probably has some moderate physical activity associated with it. Are you beginning to see that there's a reason that some people are still saying that friends with benefits, meet somebody that you have this attraction spark with, and have a few drinks in the bar, and then follow one of each other home and have sexual activity, is going to pump those attraction romantic chemicals, but it is not going to do anything to help somebody do long-term bonding, committed love relationships. I believe we need to teach young people about this, but you can only teach what you know. And we haven't even known this as researchers. What we are pretty clear about is that the past is the best predictor of the future. We know that relationships can be wonderful, but they take energy. Meaning that almost anything worthwhile takes energy. I was so fortunate. My mother had played the piano for 30 minutes a day the whole time she was pregnant with me, and I think I was born loving a piano. And she says I began asking for a piano when I was 3 years old, and they were as poor as church mice. Finally, they found a piano they could afford when I was 4, and I started learning to play the piano. I have a relationship with music. I have a relationship with many people who love music. Some of my best friends are composers and performers. It takes energy. It took energy for me to learn to play the piano. It was worth every moment, in my brain's opinion, but remember that anything worthwhile is usually going to take some energy. I don't think there are any good or bad relationships unless one or both have a strong addictive behavior, or one of the brains is clearly mentally ill, because you really cannot be bonded with a brain that is that dysfunctional, my brain's opinion, or if the brain is evil. But other than that, the more you have in common with that person, the less energy it's going to take to keep the relationship going. And this is the era of cross-cultural, cross-racial, cross-whatever relationships, and I don't have any problem with that. The brain is the same color regardless of skin color. What you need to look at, however, is how diverse are your backgrounds, and are you prepared to put the energy out to negotiate that? Because my French side of the family celebrated Christmas in church at midnight, Mass, most of them Catholic. The Irish side of the family, they celebrated Christmas and New Year's in the pub. So you combine these two types of backgrounds. You best be doing a lot of talking and negotiating before you get married, because you're going to have different cellular memory urges at Christmas. And how are you going to deal with that? And when you have children, how are you going to deal with that? You know, are you going to take some of the kids to the pub with you and the rest of them to midnight Mass? I mean, think about it, because the less energy it takes for you to keep this relationship on track, the easier it is to bond and have 60, 70 wonderful years together. When you're looking at this is my brain's opinion, it is very important for you individually to develop a good moral character with clear, high standards and bona fide boundaries. And that will let you know when you walk into certain situations or when you're asked to do something, whether or not that matches your standards and your boundaries. And if you don't even have them defined, you are at sea in a canoe with no paddles, and it will be easy to get off track. The higher your level of emotional intelligence, the more likely you are to make good choices. When young people come to me and say, you know, I just can't find any really good partners out there. You know, there's just not very many. And I look at them and say, well, partnering is very much like water. It seeks its own level. Are you becoming the person that you want to attract? Because otherwise, you'll be attracted by people who are at your level of standards and boundaries and so on. So stop looking for somebody. Get busy becoming the person that you want to partner with. Because they'll find you. They'll find you. You'll find them. Once you do meet somebody, this is where I think we really drop the ball. You need to evaluate that person as the potential parent of your children. You want to evaluate who would be your in-laws, their family, and hopefully they're doing the very same thing for you. You need to be evaluating them to see if they're the kind of people you want your children to hang out with. Because not only will they be giving your child cellular memory, but when you get together, they're going to have a major impact on that child. Who do you want? And I hear people, especially women, say, oh, you know, things will be better when we get married. And I'm going, dream on. I don't think it ever gets any better than what happens when you're dating in terms of the type of behaviors you see exhibited. Yes, you can bond and have a wonderfully close relationship, but the past is the best predictor of the future. You know, trying to change somebody is like driving down a one-way street and expect to get on the freeway. And I still see people trying to change others. Give it up. William Swing said, when merchandised for instant gratification, whether that's an actual sexual act, whether it's pornography, masturbation, you name it, when merchandised for instant gratification, there is nothing deadlier than sex. Because it's so easy when there's not a lot going on in a person's life to get caught up in the excitement that sexual activity can trigger as it relates to the brain reward system. And this is my brain's opinion. We didn't know a lot of this information. We were just told, don't do that. And that just puts in your brain the very thing they didn't want you to do. So we need to teach children, young people, how to do things. And when you know better, you can do better if you choose to do so. It's critically important to learn this information, to be comfortable about talking about it, to live it, because it matters.
Another story about God using young people in evangelism. Taylor is a California Youth Rush student from the San Jose area. Last year, after a summer of serving God in intense evangelistic work, Taylor joined 1,000 other young people at Pacific Union's iShare convention in Visalia, California. There, she was baptized. She began attending Oakwood University and seeking for Jesus and earning funds for her Christian education. Now, what's interesting is that Taylor found out about the Seventh-day Adventist message from her big sister, who herself discovered it by coming home one day and finding a glow tract stuck on the doorknob of her apartment home. Now, both Taylor and her big sister serve God and reach out with all of their hearts. God uses young people in evangelism.
We would like to thank the constituency of the Central California Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church for making this program possible, and from viewers just like you. Thank you.